Welcome to Fall Rise Give, a space where we invite you to dig into the real cause of your suffering, looking at opportunities for growth with a change in your beliefs, thoughts, and actions so you can be your true self and be inspired. Join us as we explore life's ups and downs and navigate the twists and turns, sharing stories of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of giving back. Whether you're looking for a change, in recovery, or simply seeking inspiration, this podcast is your go-to for candid conversations, raw emotions, and a whole lot of heart. Tune in and discover how to fall, rise, and give back on life's extraordinary journey. Fall, Rise, Give, turn struggles into opportunities by being your true self and help others. How you doing? I'm Bartender Bob, and you are?
Kumar. I'm doing really well, Bob.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, before we get into the show, I kind of wanted to talk about following through on things and giving things a chance, giving things time. So I worked on Saturday night at the bar as a bartender, and I live in a town of 191 people, as I've told you before. There are 3 bars in town. There were 2. The third one just reopened 2 weeks ago, and our business has just gone from, because the bar I work at is mostly a restaurant. So I mean, we've got restaurant and / bar, but I work at the restaurant, the fancy, the quote unquote fancy restaurant for Ferryville, Wisconsin. And 9 o'clock, there's no customers in the bar, 0. I started to do my cleanup. I figured I can close probably at 10:30. I'm doing my sweeping. I got my coolers all stocked. I got everything all ready, ready for the Sunday crowd. And I was doing a little bit of, table cleaning and stuff. And 2 people walked in at about 5 minutes to 10. And I'm like, oh, man, come on in, They sat down, and I talked to them. The lady ended up being a bartender from another town, and they were just on vacation. And then pretty soon, this car pulls up, and then another car pulls up. They get out of their car. They look at the bar where I'm working. They look at the restaurant, and they start walking toward the other place. And so I run over and open up the door, and I yelled, and I'm like, hey, come on in here. And they did. And there's like 8 people. So I ended up having 10 people from 10 to 12:30 yesterday, just because I had the chance, because I stayed open longer than I was going to, and because I had the quote guts or whatever to call out the door and say, come on over here. Ended up being a great night. Ended up meeting some really super fantastic people from Waterloo, Iowa. And I met these other people that were from the other side of the state. They were up by the Milwaukee area. And so it's kind of cool that putting together some of the things that we've talked about here is just, giving things a chance, giving it time actually worked for me in real life. And I thought I'd share that with you.
Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. So basically what you're saying is kind of a slow, dead, not a failure of a night, but, kind of a slow night. And then you turn it around. Mm-hmm. You had a little bit of luck with a couple walking in, and then you took the initiative and went out there and said, hey guys, come on to my bar. I'm pretty cool over here.
Yeah.
Come and have a good time. And so it took a little bit of self-confidence, a little bit of courage, and that's all it takes. And next thing you know, we're talking about it on the show, how a little thing, little action on your part, little initiative turned into having a good night for you. And that's exactly what we're talking about. Baby steps to do little things so make a big difference in your one night. It could be a week. It could be whatever.
And the cool thing is so that, like I said, there's a big group of people there. I think there was 2 people in the first group and then 8 people in the second group. And the second group, they all came in. They all ordered drinks except for one person. And I said, so you don't want anything? She goes, well, I'm the designated driver. And I said, that's fantastic. So I gave her a soda. I gave her a soda. And then we were talking a little bit longer because that's what I do when I'm working. I talk to everybody. And she ended up she's 9 months sober now, similar to you. And so we were talking a little bit about that, and I said, "Well, I said the funny thing is that I have a podcast that I do with my buddy Kumar, and I kind of explained a little bit about your deal, a little bit about mine, and the 5 of the 8 of them went on their phones and liked our podcast right off the bat. So we're probably going to get a couple of new listeners, influx of people because of that. So." But the cool thing was that she said that it's not difficult for her to go into a bar because she likes the social aspect, as do you.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I went to a dinner party last night. Same thing. I brought my own non-alcoholic beer and Diet Cokes, and people are drinking wine. Red wine was a little bit of a trigger for me because I used to love red wine. That was my drink of choice.
Mm-hmm.
But not really. I was prepared. I had a great time at dinner, and at 9:15 we left the party and got home in a decent time. And so, yeah, I love the social aspect of just socializing with people, and going to a bar or restaurant is one of my favorite things to do 2 or 3 times a week.
Wait, no, let's kind of parlay this into our topic, because when we brainstormed this week, we wanted to talk about guilt, shame, and vulnerability. And I mean, with you being at the dinner party and with your trigger of red wine, I mean, that put you in a vulnerable state. I mean, was that a difficult thing for you to overcome?
It was a little bit. But I basically, normally I don't talk about being sober and going to AA meetings and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
The attitude adjustment program, as we call it. But I was able to be open and honest, saying, look, for me, it became a daily thing. And instead of drinking just on the weekends, I was drinking most of the nights. And that's a problem when you are working and you want to live a healthy lifestyle, which I do. It's not conducive to that. I was basically getting up, working out every morning, and I was like just super sluggish and super tired. And so for me, I wanted to live an optimal life, and it didn't work out. But sharing that with somebody who was drinking wine, and a couple of conversations that I had, I was able to get through it. And being vulnerable, I think just means being honest about whatever you're feeling in the moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sharing your true feelings of the situation, like, hey, this is a triggering event for me, and it's not the easiest, but I made a different decision, and that's what I'm sticking to.
See, that's awesome. I mean, and kudos for you. I applaud you for being able to do this and to be open and honest about it, because I mean, it is called AA for a reason, because it's Alcoholics Anonymous, and here you're putting your face to, your face and your voice to your struggles and your road to recovery. And to me, I think that's fantastic that you're able to do that.
Yeah, and to do that with people that you meet for the first time, right? There's a couple in there that was new in the dinner party. Others I had met. He was a Boeing exec who's just retired, and she's an Amazon exec. And it doesn't really matter to me what people do or live and do that kind of thing. I'm like, I'm just going to be myself.
Mm-hmm.
And part of being myself is being honest and saying, this is what my struggle is. This is kind of where I'm going. And once you mention it, that it's your struggle, it doesn't become a struggle anymore. It's kind of out in the open. That's what vulnerability allows you to do, is get it out in the open, then it gets off your shoulders. And so that's the beauty of the program. That's the beauty of being honest with yourself and others. And you just get things off your shoulders. You don't hold things in. There's no secrets in life anymore.
Right.
And when we hold on to secrets, they may not be that big of a deal to others as well. As I mentioned before, most people are listening to WIIFM. What's in it for me? Nobody really cares what's going on in your life. I mean, generally they'll be a little bit interested here and there, but
Mm-hmm.
they're always listening in the back of their head what's going on for them. And so don't worry too much about what other people think or what's going on. Just be honest with yourself and honest with other people, and life will be good.
It's funny that you mentioned the WIIFM. I've never heard that before. Right now, this is the first time I heard it. What's in it for me? I think that's fantastic. Being a former radio personality myself, that would have been great to know back when I was on the air. So, the funny thing is about the the what's in it for me, and the people don't really give a damn about your life, is true to a point. But I mean, if you look at and think about our social medias these days, we've got Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or not Twitter anymore, X. We have all of these places for us to share our life. I think most of us share not our struggles, but most of us share our things that we've done really well. Most of us share our moments of joy, and our moments of, hey, we just kicked this ass, and we're gonna, we're doing this. They don't show the point where you stubbed your toe, and they don't show the point where you, like your example of you being at a dinner party and having triggers for things that for you there. Or they don't show the fact that you got a flat tire. They show the fact that I got my flat tire fixed and somebody helped me. Not the struggles that went into the point, but something that showed up as you being the winner.
Yeah, they don't share the fall; they share the rise, right?
Right.
And exactly, and rarely do people talk about giving, and maybe because they're society-wise, maybe we don't give as much, and or we we think we want to be more humble. We want to give in a quiet piece of ourselves. So maybe there's a little bit of guilt involved with trying to broadcast certain things about your self achievements or what have you. But yeah, I mean, the key for me is you do share the good things. You need to find a place where you can be vulnerable and share your truth. And so for some people, it's therapy. Some people, it's a recovery group. Some people, it's family and really good friends to be able to say, hey, Tom, I'm struggling with this situation. I had a situation with a friend. He was sharing certain things with me this weekend, Friday night, and over text. And I could tell he was in pain and around this relationship part of his life. And for me, all I could do was support him and be in the best listening phase. I had recommended a couple of situations for him and they weren't working out, and it wasn't him lack of trying, but I was just nudging him along, like, this is kind of what you want to do. Sure, you want to do this? Let's go ahead and do this. And he's basically said, I've tried this and that, and it didn't work. And so at that point, I was left with just listening and supporting my friend the best way that I could. And so he ended up, I think, felt listened to and supported. And that's all we need when we're being vulnerable. It's just that we're heard and we get it off our chest, right? And then we automatically feel better.
Do you find it hard to find somebody to listen to you, or like you've got Jill, so I mean you have the opportunity there to talk with her since she's your spouse and loved one and whatnot. But I mean, besides having a spouse there and having a loved one there, is it hard for you to find somebody to say, hey, this is Kumar, I've got an issue with this and I need to talk to somebody about it?
I think men have a harder time than women do. In the attitude adjustment program, they talk about pick up the phone and call someone if you're struggling with a particular situation, an emotional state or emotional event that's going on for you. If it's triggering event, it doesn't have to be just about alcohol. It could be about relationship stuff. It could be about work stuff. And so in the attitude adjustment program, they have somebody called a sponsor. And you have a sponsor, but it doesn't have to be a sponsor either. It could be another person in the group that you're friends with. So the group itself has a collective of people that share their phone numbers with, and you text them like, hey, Brad, I'm having a hard time about this. Do you want to talk? Are you able to talk today? And you can text someone and you can have a good conversation. I did that with my friend Ryan that we've had on a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago, about something that I was going through. And he helped alleviate, and he was right. Whatever advice that he was giving me, he's like, you're making a big deal out of this situation. That you're making a mountain out of a molehill, and it's really not that big a deal. And he was right. And
Right.
I was just literally going off my kilter and like, oh my God, I'm going to lose my job. Shit's happening, blah, blah, blah. And he's just like, dude, your boss just wants things 1, 2, and 3. He's probably got somebody else asking him for the same thing. So just give him what he needs and don't look into it bigger than what it is. And so that's what listening does. I think women have an easier time. They tend to have bonds. They talk about their feelings and their emotions and that kind of stuff more. I think men have a hard time unless they're in a program where they can be real men, either a church group. There are church groups that people do that with vulnerability. I think there's men's groups that people belong to. And then the beauty of this attitude adjustment program is that's really where people share their true feelings and then their true vulnerabilities. And everybody else kind of resonates with like, yeah, I felt the same thing. Not just about my drinking, but about my relationship or about my work situation or about my recreational activity or my, life in my life path or whatever's going on in my career. So people share all sorts of stuff. And I think that's where vulnerability really helps. And so the thing is, we keep secrets thinking nobody knows, but other people tend to know what's going on as well. And so people keep a secret around drinking a lot, especially if they're drinking alone or an addiction of some sort. And so sharing that with somebody, losing that power over you because you make such a big mountain out of this a small situation. Like nobody's perfect. Nobody's expects you to be perfect. everybody has addiction of some sort. Some people like a bag of chips, and some people like beer. Some people like ice cream every night, right? It doesn't really matter. You got to have a little bit of a vice or two.
Mm-hmm. You know, it's funny when you were talking about the mountains out of molehills. I don't know if you heard me giggle a little bit. My middle son used to say that to me all the time when they were growing up. He's like, Dad, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. And you know, I think back on the situations where that's happened, and he was absolutely right. I think that we as humans tend to over dramatize or overthink a lot of things, and so like this little thing ends up being this huge thing that doesn't really need to be. It doesn't even need to be a thing at all. And that's part of the growth that I did personally, is stepping back before reacting. You know, looking at a situation and saying, you know what, Bob, you don't need to blow up over something like that. And it's actually helped me. And you know what else? Honestly, you know what else has helped? When I worked in radio, I did talk radio. And following the politics and following all the, you know, the BS that we're going through right now with this presidential election and all the stuff, that the propaganda that's being thrown out there by both sides and the PAC groups and all this stuff, not listening to that on a daily basis, I'll tell you what, Kumar, my life is so much easier, so much better not listening to, you know, all of that BS, if you will.
Yeah, totally agree. I actually don't watch CNN or MSNBC or any of those shows, Fox News or whatever. Any of those shows I don't watch. If there's something going on, like the conventions that were going on, I watched a little bit of the highlights of the conventions and those shows. Just wanted to see kind of what the overall message was.
Mm-hmm.
But I get most of my news from reading certain newspapers and or certain sites. But I tend to spend most of my time on either financial news on Bloomberg or CNBC.com, and or I get my sports stuff from ESPN, and that's what I care about. That's where I spend my energy. Besides reading self-help books and books about spiritual stuff, I tend to focus my mind on and my thoughts around things that are positive, things that I want to achieve. And so you are your thoughts. You are not technically your thoughts, but your thoughts determine what your actions are. Your actions end up in your experiences, and then your experiences end up turning into beliefs, which could be wrong or could be right, depending on how you look at it. But yeah, so what you feed into the brain is what you get out of it. And so it's really important to me that I'm feeding the right level of information.
Right. Well, you know, it's funny. Even I'm sorry, I keep saying it's funny to say that, but a lot of that's what we've talked about in previous episodes of the podcast is manifestation. If you're thinking positive, you're going to do positive. If you're thinking negative, you're going to do negative. If you're thinking, you know, so if you align yourself with things that you want to do, that's what's going to happen. As even we mentioned, you know, like the 5 people that you spend the most amount of time with are the people that are going to help you to form and to maneuver life the way that you need to maneuver it, and to have a basically a good life.
Exactly. Like I think I mentioned, or we mentioned in the previous podcast, you are the average of the 5 people that you hang out with. So whatever they're bringing to the table is who you hang out with. And so I happen to tend to spend most of my time with people who are positive, people who are into spiritual stuff, people who are into looking at things that they want to manifest and things that they care about, and living a joyful life. Like I have my golfing buddies and I hang out with them and play golf and the recreational activities as well. Right. So life to me, it is about little molehills. Don't make mountains out of those. You know, don't sweat the small stuff. It's that Roy Smalley thing, right? And most of all the stuff is small stuff.
Yep.
In this universe and in this life, you've got 60, 70, 80 years, and one little event in your life is not going to change your thing. Most of this stuff is small stuff. And the key is not to make a mountain out of a molehill. And so as that Roy Smalley thing, you know, don't sweat the small stuff. And remember, most of the stuff is small stuff. It's in our life of, you know, 60, 70, 80 years, whatever, how long we're going to live. One event in one day doesn't mean much. There's 365 more days. And I was talking to a therapist this week on a situation, and she basically was talking about how whatever stress you're going through, it isn't going to last. So the phrase "this too shall pass" came about. And so there's just certain amount of level of stress that most people have in a particular moment or what have you. That was Wednesday night. I was talking to her, and Thursday I had a pretty important big day at work. But what I did is what I could control was after I got out of that appointment, I was there talking to, I went to talk to my wife about dividing up the work for the night, family events or whatever. And then I went to work. I got on my laptop, started working away, challenging or finishing up my task. And then I got up the next morning early, went to the gym and finished my tasks. And what I could control is what I did. And then I had a big meeting with my boss and everybody. And my boss goes, "Kumar, finish up whatever you're doing." And I said, "I already finished it." So that level of confidence that I brought to myself by able to take the initiative, realizing that all this stress will pass, but what I can control is what I can take action on. I took action on that night, and it's totally okay to work a couple of hours on a weeknight sometimes, as long as it's not every night, right? Then you got a problem if you're working every night and that kind of an issue. So I basically took a big event, big Thursday that I was going to have, broke it up into little pieces, turned it into a little molehill, and accomplished my task. And Thursday went by, ups and downs, and it ended up being a good day. And so that's kind of the lesson of it all. Don't make mountains out of the molehill.
And also, I mean, with that way of thinking and that way of doing things, you don't have the guilt of taking away a lot of family time. You don't have the guilt of taking away time from things that you already had planned, or if you had a meeting to go to or a social event or something. If you take smaller pieces, if you end up making it into a molehill rather than a mountain, you're able to finish the task without putting a lot of stress on yourself and without making yourself feel guilty about missing out on other things.
Exactly. And so, it's a great point. It's like, talk about feeling guilty. Feeling guilty about something that you did wrong or something that went wrong for you. Usually it's intentional. You made a mistake. I made a mistake on Wednesday. That's why I ended up working on Thursday, Wednesday night, because Wednesday morning he asked me, "Did you finish this?" And I'm like, "No." And I apologized and blah, 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 put my vulnerability hat on and said, "I've just been too busy." And owning it, right? Saying I didn't do it because of XYZ. And Wednesday night, I ended up doing it. So what I did is I took the guilt and I didn't let it turn into shame.
Perfect.
The difference between guilt and shame is pretty evident. When you feel guilty about something, you made a mistake, it's a moral barometer of some sort. It's a barometer that says, I didn't live up to my standards, so I feel bad about it. What you don't want to do is feel bad, so bad that you try to numb your pain through an addiction of some sort. And you don't want to not take action. When you turn into shame, you go hide in the corner with your addiction of sort and you don't take action. That's where shame gets to do and becomes toxic. So we all know shame can then it affects your self-worth and it affects your self-esteem. And so shame is really about a long-lasting mistake that you made on making yourself and your self-worth be really low. So the key is to say, yes, it's a barometer. I'm human. I made a mistake, and letting it go, that I'm not perfect. I'm not supposed to be perfect. Guiding yourself out of it. Don't make a mountain out of that guilt and turn it into shame. Turn that molehill and say, you know what? I made a mistake. I'm not human. And that's the biggest thing that most people in the attitude adjustment program get. They realize, I got a DUI or I went to jail or whatever. A lot of people go and make these mistakes and then they hold on to this and make a huge mountain out of it. There have been tons of people.
They let their life spiral out of control, which is something that you shouldn't do. The first step is take personal responsibility for something that you did, and then find out what it is you need to do in order to stop that spiral from happening.
That's it. Use guilt as a barometer saying you made a mistake and you don't want to do it again. When
Right.
you let it turn into shame, you let it get out of control, and that's when you do certain things. I'm thinking of a guy, Michael Milliken, who was a savings and loan um, disaster. He ended up blowing up and went to jail for like 10 years. And he came back from jail. He was this big finance guy worth $1 billion or something like that.
Hmm.
And he came back and started this education company, and he started doing all this great work. And so here's a guy who was the top of the world, lost all of his money or lost a huge chunk of it, went to jail for like 10 years or whatever it was. It was a long time. Came back, got involved, used his brain, and realized he made a mistake and started creating this education and nonprofit type work to make the world a better place. Created the Millikan Institute. And so you can do amazing things, even if that bad of a thing that happens, that you go from the top of the world to the bottom,
Hmm.
and you can come back. So when you fall, you can rise.
Can rise. Yeah.
You can rise and you can come back, but don't let shame guide you. Don't turn mountains out of your mistakes, and just make them little molehills and just go through them. And then once you start giving away that struggle and you turn into a gift, that's when you start to see the true you. That's when you start to see joy. That guy, Michael Milliken, started giving away to society. And then he started to have a joy and he started to be successful. He ended up being on TV again. And so all of this stuff happens in life once you start giving away your gift, whatever lesson that you learned. There are a lot of other people that have gone through similar things, and sharing your struggle with other people can really help them. By being vulnerable, you can share. By being guilty, you can figure out it was a mistake. By being shameful, you won't share if you're shameful, right?
Right.
That's a big thing you're shameful about. That's where, and we'll talk about the attitude adjustment program and some of the steps in it that they actually talk about. There's actually a step that you write down all of your defects or all the mistakes that you made in your life. And then the next step is actually about sharing that with another human being. So I know that you had talked about that with me offline, but yeah, we'll talk about some of the key steps there and the principles of success and principles of just
And
living a
we'll do
better,
that, and
more
we'll do
joyful
that in the
life.
future. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
do that in the future and look into something like that. I want to flip it a little bit and ask about. I know that you have Netflix because we've talked about that in the past. Have you seen the show called Love on Netflix?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so Monique told me about the show, and she's been out of town the last week, so I binge watched it, and it's about this nerdy guy and this kind of good looking girl, and they kind of end up getting together. She's got a lot of addiction problems. She's an alcoholic, she's a drug addict, and she's a sex and love addict, and it kind of shows how she's maneuvering her way through life, and she's finally stepped up. I'm only in season 2 right now, and there's 3 seasons, but it's showing kind of the steps of her going to meetings, and how she's letting herself be open, and letting people know about the problems that she has. But to see that as a person that has never gone through the program myself, and to hear what you've talked about and what Gabe has talked about and what some of our other guests have talked about in the past, it's interesting to have a layman's look or a layman's view of what kind of goes on. And I'm sure it's Hollywoodized, whatever, but it kind of gives me an insight to what it is that you're feeling and what it is that you're looking at. And then I also realized while watching that there's more than just the AA program. There's there's a narcotics program. There's a sex program. There's a program for people who are loved ones of people in the Alcoholics Anonymous program called Al-Anon. So there's different programs for different types of people and different types of addictions.
Yeah, yeah. There's an Overeaters Anonymous, and there's lots of programs for lots of different people. There's programs for youth and teens, and um, that show is pretty old. I think it's over a decade old.
I think it's 2016 is when it came out, so it's about 8 years old. Yeah, so it's been around for a while, and I just got around to watching it now.
Yeah, she was a producer at a TV show or some sort of a show, right?
Yeah,
she worked for a television show or something in LA. I think it takes place in LA or somewhere in California.
It was a radio program. She was a producer for a radio program. So I had the same kind of feeling because I worked as a producer and as a talk show host and whatnot. So yeah, it's a good show.
It really is. I did watch it. I did watch the first one or two. It was kind of depressing at first, but it was also kind of interesting with this nerdy guy,
right?
Enabling certain things and kind of doing what he was doing with his friends. And so it was a really cool show. And I think I'm glad that it gave you a little window on what actually can happen and how people struggle and still live a life that they're trying to live.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I think it took place in Hollywood or something like that. It's interesting getting a window to see that there are opportunities for you to go find help, right? And so that's really kind of at some point what we want to do is to take anybody who thinks that they have a problem with an addiction, just Google the addiction and Google Anonymous or after it, and you might be able to go get help. And I'm a huge fan of attitude adjustment program. A lot of newcomers go into it seeking whatever help. I think if you have an addiction with alcohol, that's the place to go. But there's all sorts of other programs out there. What you get out of it is not just the addiction, but why the addiction existed in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You get to uncover that. And that's the beauty of life. That's the emotional sobriety and the spiritual sobriety of like, okay, what's really going on between those 2 years? Am I really making big mountains out of molehills? Am I living a life that I want to live? Am I just surviving, or do I want to be thriving? And so that's what some of these programs can help you do. And then reading self-help books, recovery books, all of that stuff. Then you start to look into life and start to thrive instead of just survive. And that's kind of what our podcast is all about, to give you the tools to start to thrive in life, not just survive. And so that's kind of the insight we're saying. But today's theme sounds like it's don't make mountains out of molehills. Don't let guilt turn into shame, and use vulnerability and honesty with yourself and others. Find somebody else you can share it with and go from there.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Fall, Rise, Give, where we explore stories of resilience, growth, and giving back. If you enjoyed today's episode, please visit our website at www.fallrisegive.com. Also, consider subscribing to our podcast on your favorite platform and leaving us a review. Your feedback helps us to continue to bring you inspiring stories. Stay tuned for our next episode, and remember, every fall is a chance to rise, and every rise is an opportunity to give. Until next time, keep falling, rising, and giving. This is Fall, Rise, Give, produced by podcastforhire.com. Thank you for listening.